Okay, Final Fantasy 16. What a game. I mean, like, seriously, like, look at... Chadley? Wait, hold on, what are you doing here? Hey, wait, wait. Hey, Chadley. Hey, no, hold on. wait, no, Chadley. Wait, hold on, Chadley? Chadley, no. Chadley, you're not supposed to be there. No, please. Hey, hello, welcome back. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Flora. You're watching Flora's Garden on my YouTube channel. Hello. And welcome to the first episode of, like, the second season, I guess? The second year that I'm doing this. This is the first game that I've finished since the 1-year anniversary. So, let's get right into that. Today we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which, if you don't know, is the second part of a 3-part quote-unquote remake. I say quote-unquote because it's like kind of a reimagining. It's kind of sort of its own thing, but we'll get into that later. Of the original game, Final Fantasy VII. You may have heard of it. It's like one of the most well-known and well-regarded RPGs and games like ever. So, you know. Actually, a little bit of context from my experience with the series. I have played Final Fantasy 16. Obviously, I made a video about that. You can check it out here, but it's also long. So, like, you don't have to, because this is like an anthology series. So you really don't need to know my thoughts on that. I will be referencing it lightly in this video. And I also played Final Fantasy VII Remake / Remake Integrate, which is the first part of this whole remake-ish thing. So that's very relevant because this game is interesting. It's very interesting because it's like the most direct sequel I've ever like seen a game be, at least in my experience. Like, it's just like very direct sequel because it is the second part of a 3-part remake thing. It's weird, it's interesting, and we'll get into how well I think it was executed as we get on with the video. So, first of all, I'm going to talk about combat stuff, because it's difficult to talk about story stuff without straight up spoiling the first part, Remake. So, we'll be talking about story last. So, first of all, it's great. It's so good. I love the gameplay in the 7 Remake games so much. It's so good. The way it works is it's kind of, sort of, a action RPG type of deal, but not quite to the degree that Final Fantasy 16 was, where it was much more of an action game than an action RPG. And a big way of how they do this is by incorporating the active time battle, aka ATB system, which was featured in the original Final Fantasy VII, and it kind of allows you to slow things down to be more strategical and working much more like a traditional turn-based RPG in the midst of much more high-paced combat. I think it's super awesome. I think it's so fun. And personally, I like it way better than Final Fantasy 16's combat. I liked Final Fantasy 16, but I liked this combat way more. And it definitely reminds me a lot of Xenoblade Chronicles, which I love those games, so that helps a lot here, for at least my opinion on this game. And a big thing they added in this game was synchronized mechanics with the synchronized moves, where you can do little like combo moves with your party members, which just helps to like build up the party members' ATBs without like switching around a bunch. Just makes things a lot easier and flow a lot better. And then there's also synergy moves, which is much more bigger, flashier combo moves. They're also just very fun. They're just fun. They're a nice expansion upon what Remake already had going on. And much like Remake, the materia system in this game is very robust. You have a lot of options for mixing and matching, and the materials allow you to do a whole bunch of different things. You can equip them on your weapons, and they let you do magic. They let you do a couple of skills. They can do some like passive things. It's very fun. It's nice to play around with. It just feels good to use. And along with that, the general weapon mechanics from Remake also come back. They're also great again. You know, you can unlock the unique weapon abilities that you get on different weapons that you collect throughout the games by just using them, and then you can switch to whatever weapon you want and still have those abilities, so you can build up your repertoire of unique abilities for each character. And it's just a really good and cool system, and it makes the characters feel very varied from each other. They feel very different from each other. It's like super impressive how different these characters all feel from each other. And you can control whichever ones you want during battle. On top of that, during the story, there is little segments of varying length where you get to play as every single party member as their own like lead, as like kind of the lead of this section. And it's neat, it's cute, it's really fun, and it really emphasizes, at least to me, that all of these characters are like very fleshed out and very different from each other, to the point that like they could kind of all be their own like lead in their own game. And it's just really cool. I think it's super fun. I love it so much. Finally, I'm just really excited to get to play it as Vincent and Sid in part 3 whenever that comes out, because they show up in this game but you can't play as them yet, which is understandable because they need to have some sort of new party members to add in for part 3, so I get it. I'm just very excited to play as them though. Then we have all of the exploration stuff, and there's quite a lot to it, because this game, unlike part 1 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, is a open world game, which is, to be honest, is kind of the biggest area where this game isn't like absolutely stellar. I think the open world in some parts was kind of weak, as in like you can't jump or like climb, which feels very awkward. It makes traversal feel a little awkward. But I think the world itself, the overworld design is great. I think it just feels nice to explore around, even if it is a little inconvenient. And I think the kind of the quote-unquote checklist type items that every open world has, I think this game does a particularly good job of them being quite varied from each other. They aren't all like the same stuff, but like different fonts. So it's kind of a give and take. There is also this one thing that's kind of really dumb in my opinion, but like it makes sense from like a meta ludo narrative thing, where you can't fast travel between the regions of the game, because there's like a bunch of different regions in this game. You can't fast travel between them until you get to the end of the game, which, like, it makes sense in universe, because in universe at the end of the game you get a fucking boat, so you can, you know, take the boat around to all of the different regions. But it was just something that was like really inconvenient, because you can travel to the different regions, but you have to fast travel to specific locations and then talk to like an NPC and then pay money to travel to the different regions. And it was just like really annoying. But at the end of the game, you do get access to full world fast travel. So it's kind of iffy on that one. If it didn't let you have that at the end, I would be actually kind of really mad about it. But it was all around just a little annoying, and it kind of deterred me from going back to areas to do more stuff in the open world. But the open world was kind of the weakest part of this game, but that isn't really saying much, because the rest of this game is kind of phenomenal. So, speaking of that, side activities. This game has just a ton of stuff to do. Like, there's so many activities, there's so many, like, side mini-game stuff. It's great. It's, as someone who loves the Yakuza games, it's fantastic. There's so much stuff to do. Admittedly, I did not do a lot of this stuff. Because I was playing this game over a very long time for all sorts of reasons. That's not the point right now. But as a result of that, I was kind of not in the mood to sink a ton of time into just doing a bunch of extra side stuff. So I kind of touched a little bit of most of the side stuff, but there's definitely some side activities that I kind of just wholly ignored. But the piano playing minigame thing, where you played specific songs, you can also like freestyle and play whatever, which is really neat. But you can find specific sheet music and then play specific songs from the original game. It's fun, it's cute. Every day I learn more and more that I think I might really like rhythm games and I should play more of those. And then there's Queen's Blood, which is this super fun like in-universe card game, and it's just really fun, and I don't want to take too long to talk about it or like explain all the rules, but it's really fun. And the developers specifically, they had like their own mini development team that took a year making this card game within this larger game, which is really funny, but also it shows. I think Queen's Blood was so fun to play. And on to the audio experience thing. First of all, I just want to say this game has an incredible audio experience. That is to say, the voice acting is phenomenal and the music is so good. This game has such an amazing soundtrack, and it has a really big soundtrack. It has 157 songs on it, and it has too much good music. I am not joking when I say there's too much good music that I can't go through and highlight stuff. So just keep an eye out in the corner for the music that I picked to feature in this video, but I can't list through songs right now. It has so many good songs though. Oh my god, and there's such a variety of like genres. Like they'll have like classical orchestra type stuff, and then like electronic music, and like jazz and opera. It's crazy. It's wild. In terms of voice actors, there is a lot to highlight also.
We got old Shooty McShooterson tied up nice and tight in a shack out in the scrapyard.
Why?
Because she and I are close, you know?
Hey, are you two done yet?
There's been a wee shooting in the lobby over there.
So I am just going to start listing people off because there's a lot to go through, because this game has a really good set of voice actors, and I will mention real quick that it is very interesting that there's actually like quite a few characters, including like main characters, who their voice actors quite literally have only played this character in the varying Final Fantasy VII remakes, which is just kind of crazy for how good a lot of them are. Let's just start bringing them off. We've got Cody Christian as Cloud Strife. He does fantastic. He does so good. Britt Barron as Tifa Lockhart. Love her. We've got John Eric Bentley as Barrett Wallace. He's so good. He's got so much passion in this character. It's great. We have Max Middleman as Red 13. He's such an interesting pick for this character at first, but then you get to hear him, because not to get into spoilers, but Red 13 kind of is putting on a front, and so partway through the game, he kind of code switches, and it's really interesting to hear a voice actor doing that, because it's the same guy, but it sounds totally different. We have Susie Young as Yuffie Kisaragi. She was the highlight of this game for me. I loved Yuffie so much. She's so goofy. I love her. She's a cutie. And also, this is the third game in a row featuring Susie, so shout out to her, I guess. We have Matthew Mercer as Vincent Valentine, which was actually a really good pick. As much as I do like to dunk on games using like Matthew Mercer and like the same like small handful of voice actors, he does do really good at this role, so I can't be that mad. Then we have J. Michael Tatum as Sid Highwind. We've got Yuri Lowenthal as Johnny. I just like Yuri Lowenthal. I'll be so real with you here. We've got Josh Bowman as Rufus Shinra. He does great. Getting into some of the villains here. We've got William C. Stevens as Rude and Piper Reese as Elena. Are both great. I'm kind of pairing them together because they're Turks. They're paired together. They show up very frequently together. We've got Austin Lee Matthews as Roche. He is so good at playing this very extra, over-the-top, flamboyant guy with a motorcycle. A couple of motorcycles. Then we have James Sie playing Professor Hojo. He does such a good job of playing this gross little man. We've got John DiMaggio, great voice actor who plays a lot of great characters, as Heidegger, who doesn't have as big of a role in this game as he does in part 1, but my god, do I love his fucking voice for Heidegger so much. And then finally, we have Tyler Hoechlin as Sephiroth. Come on, man, that's so good. What the fuck? Before we get into the story stuff, just to like kind of explain a bit of what this game is, which didn't think I would have to do that for any of these videos, but here we are. So this game is the second of 3 parts of a remake, quote unquote, even though I think remake is doing it a disservice, because this is kind of a from the ground up like reimagining of Final Fantasy VII. And again, this is the second part of 3, but it also very much is able to stand on its own as its own standalone game, which is all very impressive and also so interesting. It's so interesting how they're doing this, but I really like it so far. So, just real quick, because it's kind of unavoidable to get into part 1 spoilers to talk about this game, but I will keep it as brief and as light as possible. So essentially, part 1, you're playing as Cloud, he joins Avalanche, and they destroy a bunch of Mako reactors, which is like this natural/nuclear energy thing that's kind of sapping from the world, and it's owned and operated by the Shinra Electric Company, which is an electric company and also like kind of sort of a dictatorship in this massive city, Midgar. Great, Midgar's so cool, it's very fun to explore around. And that story follows like roughly the first 10 hours of the original game, and it is expanded out to its own huge like 50+ hour RPG, which culminates in the party, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, literally killing Fate, like in universe. I think this plot point was interesting. I think I was much more receptive to it than others, because notably, I haven't played the original Final Fantasy VII. I know about it, I know stuff about it, but I think this game was very fitting for this kind of weird sort of remake, sort of sequel, reboot-ish thing, because Final Fantasy VII, not only is it just one of the most known RPGs out there, but it's also a game that's very readily available. You can play it right now. I can tell you right now, if you are watching this YouTube video, I can guarantee you can play this game. You have something that has access to the original game. As time went on, because it was such a huge success, Square Enix just kind of kept putting out a variety of different Final Fantasy VII related things and spin-off games, which is referred to as the compilation. And so I think this kind of reboot-ish thing is interesting because it allows them to kind of incorporate stuff from the compilation into the original story and also kind of make it be its own thing within the compilation. So I think it's a super interesting take. Much like my thoughts at the end of part 1, we kind of need to just wait and see how it ends. But this game, it starts right after the events of part 1 with the flashback of Sephiroth's descent into madness and the destruction of Nibel. Then we return to the party, which consists of eco-terrorists, a goddess, a lab rat, eventually a teenage assassin, a middle-aged office worker, a southern man, and a hot vampire with guns. And then finally, our main character, we have Cloud. The main goal of the story is to try and find Sephiroth, who died years ago, but Cloud and the rest of the party, after the events of Remake, are convinced that Sephiroth is somehow still around and kicking, and that would be really bad, because he's crazy and also, like, super powerful. So they go on this adventure, not only escaping from persecution, because they're, like, criminals, but also to try and stop Sephiroth from utilizing the Black Materia, which is an all-powerful weapon of mass destruction. And the big twist in this part of the story is the introduction of a number of parallel timelines, one of which includes a universe timeline where Zack Fair survives the ending of Crisis Core and kind of the ripples that that effect has, which is interesting. I will come back to that after I talk about spoilers though, so that's what we're gonna do now. You can skip to whatever's on the screen. I'm gonna talk about spoilers now. So the ending of this game was like really well executed. and if things were ever so slightly tweaked, it honestly would have been able to like be its own standalone ending to like its own story if it weren't, you know, like the middle part of a remake, which I think is a really good way of handling it, because, you know, it is still its own game. Even if it is part 2 of 3, it is still its own game, so I think that's good. I think the final bosses, the varying final boss fights, were super cool. I loved how it forced you to use all of your party members, because you have, what, 7 party members at this point? And you can only have 3 fighting at the same time. And it also even throws in Zack Fair with some weird timeline shenanigans going on during the fight. So it was just fun. I really liked that. My biggest worry is honestly just like how they're gonna top this gameplay-wise when we get to part 3, because the final boss of this game, much like part 1 of the remake, was Sephiroth. So I'm curious how they're gonna be able to top this gameplay-wise and also narratively make it not kind of boring to just be Sephiroth again. Much like part 1, I don't really think the full impact and implications of this like multiple timelines thing can really be seen within this game alone. I do think there's some really interesting implications that Sephiroth is going to kind of try and conquer / destroy all of the worlds instead of just the one, which would be a very interesting departure, and I'd be curious how they'd execute all that. And it does tie into, I know there was like some sort of theories when Remake came out that Sephiroth and Aerith somehow were the Sephiroth and Aerith from the original game that like somehow leaked into this timeline or something, so they like kind of sort of know what's happening already, which I think is like kind of an interesting idea, but that's kind of neither here nor there. So it's kind of a matter of waiting and seeing for part 3 of how that all goes. But this was a ramification of the party destroying Fate in part 1, so it's very much a direct response onto that. Cloud ends up sitting in this kind of weird place where he's seemingly like sinking between multiple timelines and worlds at once, because he first is able to stop Sephiroth from hitting Aerith with his downward aerial, but then she is also dead at the same time, so it's kind of hard to explain it, but both Aerith and Zack, who are dead in the main timeline, may not be so entirely gone in part 3, which would just be interesting. It kind of depends on how it's executed, obviously. But my opinions on this game, from a story standpoint, much like part 1, are pretty heavily dependent on how the conclusion of this quote-unquote remake trilogy sticks the landing and pays off all the changes that occur in this reimagining of the classic game. Especially when you get multiple timeline stuff, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do with that, especially with how it's been set up so far in this, but I also think there's a lot of pitfalls that you can fall into, so we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Overall, I enjoyed it, but it's kind of dependent on how part 3 goes. But regardless of that, the gameplay of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is phenomenal. It's so good, and is genuinely some of the most fun you can have playing an RPG. Like, the open world and the exploration of that is pretty much the exclusive area that I wouldn't say is like exceptionally great in this game. So I highly recommend this game if you can get a PS5 to play it on. At least at the moment, it's probably going to come to PC eventually. But yeah, I think it's great. I highly recommend it. So yeah, hi, welcome to the end of the video, the little end slate bit of the video. I hope you enjoyed this first, like, real video for Season 2 of Flora's Garden. I hope you liked how it came out. This is, again, kind of how I'm trying to make the videos be a bit shorter, be a bit more and also less casual at the same time. So, let me know what you thought about it. You can leave a like, comment, and or subscribe. Maybe. That would be appreciated. And yeah, I will see you next time, which the next video will probably be Signalis. But we'll see. We'll see. It'll be a little surprise, maybe. Probably not. So, I'll see you next time. Until then, bye.